All right, Dom, let's go ahead and start talking about some of your biggest areas of expertise. The
Well,
training.
training obviously is a huge subject with what I do with Dynamis. I spent 12 years in the military, and with that, the amount of experience that I gained, not only through training, but reality, going over rep after rep, operation after operation, and being on the X, you start to forge a level of understanding of reality that some people just don't have access to.
Yeah.
And I was even having a conversation with a guy today that said, when it hits the fan and I'm just going to lose it, I'm not going to make the right decisions. And I'm like, hold on. Are you capable of thinking through and making decisive action on a daily basis? Yes. Then you can go through a threat scenario and make decisive action, no problem at all. And if you go to our website at Dynamis, you'll see that one of the things that I always say is that we create solutions for modern day threats, period. That's what I've had the experience of doing. So we've dedicated ourselves to making sure that we have the proper training in order to do that. So it's something I'm extremely passionate about. And from a citizen or anybody in the world that cares about protecting themselves and their family, at this day and age, as unpredictable and as risky as things are becoming, especially with the growing increase of terrorism and these little pockets and random attacks, is that training should be a part of your daily routine. You wake up, you go, you create revenue, you take care of your family, you get to the gym, and you should be training. In some way, shape, or form, put the time aside to increase your situational awareness, better your mindset for what could happen, because at the end of the day, me and you, Colion, we always talk about how you don't need it until you do. And that percentage is small, but at the end of the day, why wouldn't we want to do everything we could to crush that risk down to nothing?
Yeah. And I know for me, one of my biggest things is I do enough shooting, but there's the mindset component that's incredibly important, like as you harp on all the time. And I know for me, I figure my biggest weakness is more so the over concern with, say, for instance, in an actual shooting situation, being shot. I think my mind gets overconsumed with that notion. If something were to happen, I'm more concerned. Oh, don't get shot, don't get shot. I think we talked about this one time.
Yeah, we did. Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things is I'll talk about mindset and I'll talk about visualization. First, the subject of getting hit, right? Getting shot or having an injury to happen to you while you're in the altercation. The first thing that I'll say is that overthinking about what you're going to do in that situation will do nothing to help you. It will only hinder your ability to perform. So you've got to compartmentalize it in a way that's like, I don't have any control over that happening to me. If I do get hit with a round, there's nothing that I can do in that moment but perform my very best. And that's why we always talk about the will to fight and crush everything. And in that very moment, you better be doing exactly that, because your family's lives or your own life is going to be on the line.
Yeah.
Mindset is an overused word, but in my opinion, it's the most important thing to talk about. So the way we program, the way we think, and that's not as tangible as anything else. It's not tangible like hitting the range. It's not tangible like hitting the gym. You can quantify those things. What you can't quantify is how we program the way we think to apply to everything else that succeeds underneath the way that we've programmed our minds. That visualization is an extremely important part of that. I've spent hours on helos and car rides and up-armored vehicles, closing my eyes, thinking to myself and visualizing, what if this happens? What if I do get hit?
Yeah.
What if I get hit in the stomach? What if I get hit in the head? What if I get blown up, right? I know that as long as I can move my finger and I can crawl forward, I'm in the fight. And that's all that matters. That there's nothing else that's going to help me. Win the fight, self-aid, buddy aid. And there's a reason we say it in that order. Win the fight. If I have anything else on my mind while I have a guy and a threat standing right in front of me, and I skip to self-aid, or I skip to, let me help my niece or my nephew or my sister that's laying on the ground, and I forget about the fight, then I've taken myself out of the problem and potentially caused everybody an issue. So that programming about the way we think is integrated into our training, and it's got to be a part of our daily repetition.
Absolutely. Now, have you noticed that when we start talking about the visualization the visualization aspect of being a gun owner or carrying a firearm, do you notice that people don't necessarily take their minds to that next step in a potential encounter? Like, I used to do this all the time. I used to envision what I expected to happen if I ever needed to use my gun. Everything went perfectly. It was like I saw the threat coming. I knew it was coming. I was able to get my gun out. Like, one of the things I learned about last time I went out and did some training by myself was realizing how many different types of shirts I wear. And not realizing I'm not always going to be able to get that perfect grab and get to my gun, because I may have on a hoodie, I may have on a jacket, I may just have on a t-shirt, but that t-shirt may run a little bit long and it may snag on a particular gun that I'm carrying that day. Do you find that a lot of people don't necessarily completely put themselves in reality when it comes to dealing with a potential threat?
Well, when you're training, what you're trying to do is get as close to your threat dynamic as you possibly can. And one of the things that we talk about, this is something that we've implemented in all Dynamis training, and I haven't seen anybody harp on it as much as we do. But at the end of the day, if you're in a dojo, if you're in a gym, if you're on the range, what happens? You go to draw, you don't do it right, you're like, oh, wait, I need to reset, right? We don't have that luxury in reality. That doesn't exist. Why in the hell would we do it integrated with our training? If you don't do it right, if your draw is not right, if your punch isn't right, if your move isn't right, work through the problem. Problem solving is potentially one of the most important things when it comes to skills in action during a threat, is because you always need to be thinking about your next move. And if you're doing that properly, you'll always have another solution ready in the hopper, ready to go.
Yeah.
If you get caught up in stopping that motion, is because people aren't connecting it to reality. That's another thing that we harp on and say, is that connection to reality is key. If I have you train in a static environment and I have you draw your gun and shoot a piece of paper, and you go to draw and you stop because something didn't go the way you expected it to, if you connect it to reality, and I look at that piece of paper and I say, that's a threat, that guy is drawing a gun on me, which is why we talk about why target ID and the target you're shooting is so important.
Yeah.
But if I visualize that potentially being a realistic scenario, then I don't have the luxury. I cannot stop and say, what is my form doing? What didn't I do right? Work through the problem and get to it. The more tenacious you are about that, the better it's going to translate to reality. What we do in training is going to carry over to reality. So to answer your question, I see it. It's probably the biggest thing that we harp on, is getting people to follow through with what they're moving through.
I know for me, when I was out there in my last training session by myself, there's something about, like, we always want to go to the range, and I'm going to wrap it up with this. We always want to go to the range and leave with a good feeling, right? And I know for me, one of the things, when I was out there, I was drawing quickly, clear, everything was perfect. But then when I started adding the more realistic components to what might happen in a situation, it didn't feel as smooth. It wasn't as clean. It didn't feel like I was, basically as confident in my ability. And so a part of me wanted to keep going back to what was easier, make everything perfect. Have the same situation, not really factor in the more realistic components to it. And we got about like a minute, about 30 minutes left. So I'll let you finish off.
So with that note, you find your rhythm and you get comfortable, right? It's when we get uncomfortable is where we really start to grow, whether you're in the gym, whether you're shooting on the range, whether you're working your mindset. People have become so used to avoiding conflict, right? Avoiding tough problems, and then they defer and they go back to their comfort zone. You got to get uncomfortable. When I see an opportunity to forge myself and forge my mindset and my skills, and I feel that uncomfort, I've learned to embrace that, because I know that's exactly what I'm going to need to make me better. When you train at home, when you're doing things to protect yourself and your family, you've got to get into those zones in order to forge yourself to a new mindset and a new capability. And that's the bottom line.
Absolutely.
When you're taking notes and you're looking to forge your training, find those things that make you uncomfortable, write them down, study them, and if always try to end on a good rep. But if you can't, then you get more time to think about what you can do better next time.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you. Thanks for joining me as always, man.
Brother.
And you have a good one.
Always. You too.
And seeing live. Join us again tomorrow.